Let's explore why we suffer. This, of course, seems to be the biggest question in all of life and is what typically gets us started down the path of enlightenment to find a solution that ends suffering. And suffering can come in all sorts of forms, psychological, physical, and so on. You know, we could have our mind be a monkey mind. It could be just running with thoughts, primarily negative if it's running wild. We can store these as feelings and emotions within our body and actually experience the negativity of the mind. But what is suffering? This is where, in the message of non-duality, things get extremely simple and cut and dry. There is self that never suffers. It has no idea what discontent is. And then there's everything else. And what is everything else other than ourself? Anything that we know with our mind, experience with our body, or perceive with our five senses, which is literally everything we know. And it's when we turn our attention away from the contentment of ourself onto anything that I just mentioned, anything that has to do with our mind, body, or senses, we suffer. Because we've left the complete and total peace of ourself. So it's an attention turning. We've turned our attention away from self onto anything other than ourself. And attention is simply the stretching or movement away from ourself onto an object. It's the Latin underlying message or a definition of attention is to stretch toward. So we're stretching or moving our attention away from ourself onto an object, and in that apparent motion, in that apparent movement, we experience a form of suffering. So how does this start, or where does it start? Well, we can go all the way back to being a baby. As a baby, we're born this pure, free-floating, boundless freedom. And our attention is only on that. We do perceive the world, but we have no idea that it's an object other than ourself. So therefore, a baby does not live in fear. It doesn't have a sense of separation, which leads to discontent or frustration or anything along those lines. So somewhere between the ages of 3 and 5, we hear our parents or our grandparents or our brothers and sisters say, "You're cute, you're a boy or a girl, you have dimples, or you have curly hair or no hair." They start to put descriptors on us. And what happens is that we turn our attention onto what we think is cute, what we think is a boy or a girl, what we think are dimples, and so on. And in that movement, in that attention, attending to something other than itself, it's attending to an object known in our mind, we begin the experience of suffering. Now, of course, this is as light as it gets. This is suffering light. But it's what happens is that as we age, we start to add all of these identities or more identities onto our being. So we're turning our attention away, you could say, deeper and deeper into the manifestation and into identifying objects, not only in the world, but identifying ourself as different attributes, right? Because now I'm 7. Now I am 5 feet tall instead of 4 feet tall. I am a fast runner. I'm good at math, or I'm poor at reading. These are all identities we add to ourselves, and the more identities we add to ourselves, the more our attention turns away from ourselves, and the more and more we suffer. And that suffering, as we move through time, is a contraction. It's a feeling within the body that I am this body. And as we work through our teens and our 20s and 30s and up, all it is just more and more identities, self-identities, in more and more conceptual knowledge of the world, because you learn more and more and more and more and more about the world, which means you're moving your attention more and more and more and more permanently onto anything other than yourself. So the message of non-duality, it's not denying anything that I just said. It doesn't deny the story of life. It doesn't deny the story of the mechanics on how it works. It just brings it to light so that we understand what we need to disassemble. Because as we age, we do reflect back from time to time in our life and see all of these changes. Like everything has changed in my life. My relationships have changed, my body has changed, my knowledge have changed, my jobs have changed, relationships have changed. But there's something that's never changed. What is that? That's the sense of self that we knew as a baby, or you could say in childhood. But the moment the mind tries to grab onto that experience, because it's so alluring, it disappears. So what are what's the mechanism in which this happens, right? Because what the message of Advaita or non-duality is saying is that there's only one substance appearing as many objects, and I am one of those objects. So how does this work? Why is it I appear or seem like an individual over here and everything else is out there? Well, the moment we turn our attention away from ourselves, there is a thought that rises. And this thought is the egoic thought. It's the ego. And this thought is the question, or it's the statement, I am this body. The moment you turn your attention away from yourself, this thought comes into play. I am this body. And this body consists of 5 sheaths. So I'm going to start to use my hands to describe this, because it's literally a mechanism that then we can reverse engineer at least most of it, so that we can see that there's some reality to this, or this is reality. So my heart, myself, the moment it turns away, the attention is turned away to the thought, I am this body. This body consists of 5 sheaths. So this body rises. Not only this body, but the whole world rises in what I'm about ready to describe. It rises from the will. It rises into the will. These are also known as our vasanas, if you've been in this message of Advaita for a while. These are our inclinations to move away from ourself. These are our egoic tendencies to move towards something other than ourself. These are what really give us our individualism. Okay, they make us unique. These are our likes and dislikes. We move towards things we like, and we try to stay away from things we dislike. From the will, it rises into the intellect. This is our reasoning. This is our logic. This is our discernment. From here, it rises into the mind, the egoic mind, the one that knows, the one that thinks it knows everything. From here, the mind rises into the contraction, the feeling of the ego. This is labeled as our prana. You could say it's our life energy. But this is tricky, because this is an egoic life energy. And what this message is saying is there is no ego, so there is no egoic energy. But that's how it appears. From here, it moves into the body, the physical body. This body that ends at the skin, and then everything else is separate. And in this body, we have 5 senses. Right? We can see, we can smell, taste, touch, and feel. And with these 5 senses, the world out here is projected. Okay, so this is the mechanism in which the apparent body and world that we know arise out of the no-thingness. Again, it goes will, intellect, mind, energy, body, senses, world. Okay, according to non-duality, if you can't experience anything directly or inherently, you discard that as false information, false knowledge. So, in this case, we should be able to reverse engineer this process to see if it has validity. Well, so let's do that. Okay, the world, if I was to take the 5 senses away, would the world exist? No. The world would not exist. If you took away my sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing, or sound, I would not be able to experience the world. Okay? If you were to take away the body, would I experience 5 senses? No. There would not be 5 senses if there was not a body. So what I'm pointing at is we can experientially examine and acknowledge the reversing of this progress, right? If I didn't have energy, could I experience the body? No. If I didn't have a mind, could I experience energy, the body, or senses, or anything above that? No. What would know it? So from here, in the waking manifestive state, we can't get before these two. Okay? This is where self-investigation or meditation, you might hear, comes into play, because our attention needs to be able to turn prior to these two to see the reality of these two. And in this progression, it's right in line with what the quantum physicists have discovered. The Einsteins, the Bohms, the Bohrs, the Oppenheimers, the Schrödingers, I mean, these are the brightest minds in history. And what they say, what their findings and analysis has said, is that everything arises out of no thing. One of the terms that they put on it is the unified field. It's an infinite potential. It's an infinite soup of potential, and everything rises out of that. And what I'm describing here with the mechanics of our experience in the world is the same thing. It's just in a, you could say, in a spiritual form of science. Because what it's saying is that everything, the world, the body, the mind, everything is arising out of no thing. And we can reverse engineer that to see if there's any truth to it. So that's an inquiry for you to look into, to see if you can to acknowledge that if you start to take away the underlying reality of these steps, if you take the underlying reality of the senses away, there's no world. If you take the underlying reality of the senses, which would be the body, if you took the body away, there'd be no senses. If you took the underlying reality of the body away, which would be the prana, there'd be no body, and so on. So back to attention. This is nothing other than attention moving up through this system into the world. So it's attention stretching itself through this onto the world. So when we, by turning our attention back through this source into the self, we return back to the peace, right? Because this whole conversation started off with, what is suffering? Suffering is attention moving through this system. And what is being suggested here is that when you move your attention back to the source of yourself, you will experience the peace that you all seek, which is the end of suffering. Yes, one of the beautiful aspects of non-duality is if you can experience it, if you can't know it inherently or experience it directly, it's not yourself. But we say, but my relationship seems so real, and the tree seems so real. But this is saying investigate into that. A relationship is known with your mind. A tree is known with your mind. So This means that your attention is moved away onto your mind to identify with these objects and these experiences. And in that moving away, we suffer. This is where we could say it's the sense of separation comes into play. It's the same thing, because the moment you turn your attention away from pure unity, then you're in a world of separation. I had a question come in this morning from somebody who was wanting to understand time. And I have it here on my phone. Time. I like to say that time is a projection of the mind. So as we move up into the sequence, once we hit here, the mind creates a time platform to where all of its thoughts and images and memories appear to get strung out on. So it gives the sense of distance, of a time distance. This is why the ego thinks that there is time. Time is nothing but another thought in the egoic mind. In reality, there is no time. It's the absence of time. You see, the mind thinks that time is this infinitely long stretch from, you could say negative infinity to positive infinity, and we are somewhere on this timeline clicking along, and we're a moment in time. That's what it appears. We cannot deny that. But in reality, it's the absence of time. Everything is actually happening now. I mean, again, back to the physicists, this is what they say as well. And then to add to that, once we get to the body, because we're a contraction, the body takes itself to be a form, and in that it thinks that everything else is a form separate from it. So it creates another platform of space. So the mind creates a platform of time, and the body creates a platform of space. And this is the time-space that we all believe is happening here. So let's see what they've said here. I really value your input because I come from a scientific background. I've been wondering how to reconcile the idea of time in relation to non-duality in science. So this is where science is coming to the conclusion that space and time aren't a function of quantum physics as well. You can read about, Donald Hoffman talks about this, Bernardo Kastrup, Hamid Akim. He's like the professor of physics at Princeton University. He's even come out and saying, we have a problem here because we can't find space and time, and without space and time, does physics even exist? Non-duality teaching suggests that time does not truly exist and that we live in the eternal now. Yes, the past and future are described as abstractions projected by the separate self. Yes, these are the time and space platforms that I just talked about. Experientially, this makes a lot of sense to me. In science, however, particularly general relativity, space-time is said to exist. So this is when we have to question, exists to who? So it exists to an ego. It exists to an individual because the individual is a mind, and the mind is a platform of time. And the body is a platform of space. So yes, to a person, this is true. Experiments with atomic clocks even appear to support this, as the time dilation of a moving clock compared to a stationary one matches predictions made by general relativity. This goes back to something we've talked about in the past. That there are two types of knowledge. There's relative knowledge and there's absolute knowledge. So everything in science, everything that an individual knows, the apparent world, is all relative knowledge because it comes and goes, and it's knowledge that we know with our mind and we sense with our bodies. Yet it has no solidity because it's constantly fluctuating. It's never standing still, so it's not considered real. What's pointed to in non-duality is absolute knowledge, the absolute of the one that never moves. It does not have a time platform or a space platform. It's dimensionless and eternal. So science exists in a realm of relativity, of relative knowledge. And we don't deny this at all. This is how it appears to be working. This is what it seems to be real. And we never deny anything in our awareness or our experience. And it appears to be important, so we allow it to be important. But it's in that relative world that's trying to reconcile the one substance of the absolute. And you just will never be able to do that. Because the relativity is the mind itself, and it's the relative mind that wants to know the absolute, and these are inverses of one another. So time is just another thought that creates the illusion of separation and hence suffering. I mean, both of these platforms, the time platform and the space platform, create the apparent illusion of separation, which leads to suffering. So what's the solution? How do I get back to the peace of myself? Well, it goes back to the progression here, is that you're turning your attention back onto the self. And the self is seeing that none of this is real. And this is, again, another very simple, it's prior to simple, solution, is because we only need to do one thing. self-enquiry is just saying is you turn your attention back onto self, and self dissolves this mechanism from the root up. And what happens is we can say now we are we're an individual in this world that has self or has consciousness or has awareness, but to the ego, this is basically non-existent. But by turning our attention back onto self, these literally start to change places. It's literally experienced as that. So now the apparent person and world is experienced within consciousness. It is literally the experience from going from an individual, a contraction, a sense of me, into the experience of expansiveness. So this is still here. The body's still here, the world's still here, the five, they're still here. It's just nobody has them anymore. It's just being experienced within consciousness itself. And if I go back to here, the suffering, the samsara is what we might hear it called, is that it's the ups and downs of happiness and unhappiness. So in an egoic world, we could say it's like this. The ego or the person has just these swings within its experiences throughout the day. And some days are wild experiences and some days are calmer. But this is how a person experiences life. But from this point of view, this is permanent. This never ever changes. That's why when you return home to yourself, there is the experience of permanent peace. And within the peace, life is apparently happening. So within the absolute knowledge, apparent relative knowledge is happening. So within eternity, within dimensionless reality, in here, apparent time and space are happening. And this is the experience of peace that we're all after on this path.